Why did a simple question in a crowded cafeteria feel more dangerous than any mission she'd survived? The hum of the air conditioning barely masked the tension Sarah carried in her shoulders. Forward operating base Rhino seemed calm from the outside, casual chatter, clinking of trays, boots scraping against tile. But beneath it all, she felt the restless pulse of a war that never slept. It lived in the glances, in the silence, in the way soldiers gripped their rifles even while eating lunch. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Glenn passed through the cafeteria doors quietly, her presence almost invisible compared to the boisterous Navy SEAL team that had taken over the middle tables. She had learned over years of service that sometimes invisibility was a power of its own. Still, she felt every pair of eyes that flicked her way. Curiosity, assessment, doubt. 3 deployments, scars both visible and buried deeper, still. To them she looked like someone who belonged anywhere but here. She chose a seat alone by the corner wall, a habit formed not from preference but practicality. Back to a protected surface. Eyes on exits, people watching without appearing to. Her father had taught her that. Colonel John Glenn. Astronaut legend, icon. And to her, a quiet, stubborn man who believed that discipline wasn't about shouting orders, but owning every choice you made. He had once told her, "Space was peaceful, Sarah. It's the people down here who are the real unknowns." She used to think it was a joke. Now she wasn't so sure. She slipped a classified folder from her backpack, flipping through the intel documents she'd been refining for days: maps, intercept logs, field agent notes. High-value target, Korangal Valley, unusual activity, the kind that meant something big. The kind that meant somebody was going to die if they got it wrong. Her water bottle sat untouched on the tray. Heat clung to her from outside, sweat still drying beneath her collar, dust itching along every seam of her clothes. The relentless Afghan sun had left a faint pink across the bridge of her nose, a small detail, but it made her look younger than the officer who'd put bullets through men trying to kill her 2 weeks earlier. That irony always stung. Too young to be trusted. Too experienced to be underestimated. Too female, according to some, to be respected. She looked up just once, scanning. 6 SEALs, easily identified without uniforms. Thick shoulders, sunburned necks, beards they half-joked about being tactical camouflage. They carried themselves like they owned every room they entered. Except one woman in the corner refused to give them that power. She smirked lightly at that thought, then returned to her notes. The loudest of the group crashed through the doors then, Lieutenant Reeves. Tall, cocky, charming in that careless way of someone who had survived enough firefights to believe he couldn't die. He greeted his teammates with a clap on shoulders and a booming laugh. "Any of you softies save me a seat, or do I gotta throw someone out?" Sarah didn't look up. Her pen tapped slowly against a map. "You hear," Reeves said around a mouthful of bread. "Some intel spook is supposed to brief us on mountain movement. Someone who probably hasn't stepped out of an office in years." The table erupted in laughter. Sarah breathed in and out, slowly. "Let them talk." "Heard the spook is fresh from the U.S., one muttered. "Probably never seen a rifle outside a museum," another added. "Hope they packed their sunscreen," Reeves said with an exaggerated sigh. Sarah turned a page, not her first time hearing this, not the last. She knew exactly what they saw when they glanced her way. A thin blonde woman in civilian clothes, ponytail pulled tight, features too clean, posture too calm. A tourist in a war zone. She had been judged like that since day one, but judgment only mattered if she let it change her. Reeves's voice carried louder suddenly. "Hey," he called across the cafeteria, "Harvard." Her pen stopped. Carefully she raised her head and locked eyes with him. The SEALs quieted slightly, hunters sensing a shift in the air. "You with State Department or something?" he asked, smirking. "You look kinda lost." Her heartbeat didn't change. Her expression didn't twitch. Just finishing some work before a meeting, she said simply. Reeves leaned back, chewing slowly as though considering her. Then, so what's your rank, Harvard? Or do you contractor types not do rank? The cafeteria wasn't silent, not yet, but the pause was real. Subtle heads turned. A few soldiers froze mid-bite. Sarah closed her folder, slipping a bookmark into place. She rose to her feet, moving with a quiet grace that came not from shyness, but certainty. She walked to their table. Reeves's smirk widened as if he expected an apology, a giggle, or a nervous explanation. Instead, she placed her credentials on the table in front of him. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Glenn, she said, Naval Intelligence. I'll be briefing your team on Operation Shadow Hawk in 30 minutes. Reeves blinked. Not a smirk, not a joke, just confusion giving way to dawning realization. And yes, she continued, I've spent the last 3 months in the field, mapping Taliban movement along the Korangal Valley. The informant who risked his life to deliver this intel trusted me, because I was the one who pulled him out when his cover broke. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a long, angry scar still healing along her arm, the kind that didn't come from office work. This was 2 weeks ago, she said quietly. He didn't survive, but the ones who gave me this no longer draw breath either. The room stilled. She could feel the shift, though her voice remained steady. No pride, no theatrics, just truth. Someone down the row swallowed audibly. Reeves stared at the scar, then at her eyes. The arrogance on his face melted into something else, awareness maybe, respect slowly taking root. But before he found words, the cafeteria doors swung open again. Commander Jackson, leader of the SEAL team. Eyes like sharpened steel, body language that demanded silence. Lieutenant Commander Glenn, he said immediately. Good, I see you've met my team. Sarah gathered her documents. We were just getting acquainted, sir. Commander Jackson nodded once. You'll be accompanying us into the valley tonight. Your informant's intel places a high-value target within range. Mission parameters updated. A ripple ran through the SEALs, surprise, concern, adrenaline. Even Sarah's breath caught briefly. Sir, Reeves spoke up uncertain. She's going with us, into the field. Jackson's gaze flicked his direction, a warning wrapped in ice. Lieutenant Commander Glenn speaks Pashto and Dari, he said. She knows the terrain, the risk, and exactly what we're after, unless you have a higher qualification. Reeves wisely stayed silent. Jackson turned to Sarah again. Gather your gear, we step off in 9 hours. Yes, sir. As she walked out, she did not look back at Reeves. She didn't need to. His earlier judgment now lay shattered across the table like broken glass, dangerous to touch, painfully sharp. But once she was outside, once the chill of air conditioning vanished and Afghan heat hit her again, she finally let herself exhale. The mission wasn't supposed to go this way. She had planned to brief, advise, and remain at base, far from bullets and mines and shadows in the dark. Now she would be climbing into the mountains with a team who barely trusted her, chasing a threat that was growing faster than anyone expected. She checked her reflection in a dusty window. Her pulse throbbed in her neck. Her eyes were alert, maybe too alert. Why was she truly here? To prevent attacks. To honor her country. To prove herself or prove them wrong. Maybe all of it. But beneath every reason lay one deeper, harder truth. She could not stand by and let others bleed if she could stop it. She pressed her fingers lightly over the scar again, a reminder of cost, a reminder of failure, a reminder that second chances were rare and brutally earned. As the sun lowered and shadows stretched long across the compound, Sarah headed toward the command tent. Mission details awaited, risks awaited, the unknown awaited. Fear walked with her, steady as a heartbeat. But beneath it, stronger still, determination. She whispered a silent promise into the wind. No one dies if I can save them, not this time. She didn't know yet that tonight would test that promise in ways she had never imagined. That every step into those mountains would pull her closer to a truth she wasn't ready to face. She only knew one thing for certain. There are moments that define a career. Moments that define a life. Sometimes they begin with a single question. And a cafeteria that falls silent when the answer arrives. How do you prepare for a mission that already feels like it's waiting to go wrong? Night arrived like a curtain dropped over the desert, sudden, heavy, full of secrets. Fob Rhino transformed under darkness. Helicopter blades beat against the sky. Radios chattered in clipped urgency. Boots hit gravel with the impatience of men who knew hesitation could kill. Sarah moved through the controlled chaos with practiced calm. Her gear felt heavier than usual, not the weight of equipment, but the weight of being needed outside the wire. Needed by men who didn't yet know if they could trust her. Needed by a commander who had pinned the fate of a mission on her instincts. She checked her rifle, chambered around, checked again. Her hands were steady, but inside currents churned. Reeves approached, helmet in the crook of his arm, uncertainty stiffening his shoulders. "You good out there, Harvard?" he asked, but the teasing tone was gone. "Yes," she replied, securing her comms, "and the name is Sarah." He nodded. Something unspoken lingered, maybe an apology, maybe gratitude, maybe fear. But fear was universal tonight. Commander Jackson gathered the team in a tight circle near the waiting Black Hawk. "We insert 1 click west of the ridge," Jackson said. "Silent climb. Glenn leads infiltration once we hit the mountain. Reeves, you take point once boots hit ground. Everyone clear." Affirmatives rippled through the group. Sarah swallowed, feeling the dryness in her throat. Jackson's gaze landed on her for half a second longer than the others, making sure she was ready. She gave a small, firm nod. They loaded up. Engines roared. Dust whipped into a frenzy beneath them as rotors sliced the air. Sarah strapped in, headset crackling softly as the helicopter rose. Below, the world shrank into a patchwork of shadows. The distant mountains stood like sentinels, jagged silhouettes waiting to judge the uninvited. The night vision made everything ghostly, shapes and movement where none should exist. Her father used to say the human mind plays tricks in the darkness. Out here, the darkness played back. Reeves sat across from her, watching. "You ever climb in pitch black?" he asked through comms. "I've climbed worse," she replied. "Worse than this?" He raised an eyebrow. She hesitated, not because she doubted, but because some truths felt like they belonged only to her. Finally, she said, "The fear isn't the climb, it's what happens if you stop climbing." Reeves nodded, eyes narrowing as if trying to decipher the deeper meaning. Then his hand tapped twice against his chest, a subtle gesture, respect, acknowledgement, hope. For the first time, she didn't feel like a stranger among them. The helicopter banked hard. 30 seconds, the crew chief shouted. Adrenaline surged, muscles tightened, breathing became measured. Sarah closed her eyes for a heartbeat. In the dark, she saw her mother's face the night she'd left for her first deployment, fear barely masked by pride. She saw her father watching the launch of a new rocket on TV, eyes distant, mind somewhere beyond Earth. Was she chasing legacy or running from it? She opened her eyes as the bird descended. The landing was rough, no lights, no hesitation. Boots hit ground, dust swallowed them. And suddenly, the helicopter was gone, its sound fading into the night like a memory. Silence rushed in to fill the void. The mountain loomed before them, a wall of cold stone. Reeves whispered, "That's impassable." Sarah stepped forward, fingers brushing the rock as if greeting an old adversary. "If it was impossible," she said, clipped and sure, "Taliban wouldn't bother guarding the other side." She secured her rope, tested the anchor, and began to climb. Each reach upward was a promise, Each foothold was a prayer. The cliff face scraped her knuckles. The wind fought every movement. Below her, the seals followed, but none moved faster. In the bone-deep silence, her mind wandered. To mistakes, to what-ifs, to a night months ago when a convoy had gone wrong, when she had lost a friend because she trusted the wrong intel. That scar cut deeper than the one on her arm. Forgiveness was a luxury she hadn't earned. Halfway up, Reeves murmured into Calm's breath strained, "Remind me, what MIT class teaches this?" Sarah allowed the faintest smile, "Extracurricular." He chuckled, then slipped, a scream caught in his throat. His hand missed the rock, weight dropping in a deadly arc. But Sarah moved faster than thought, gripping his harness strap with brutal strength. He dangled, panting hard. "You okay?" she whispered. His voice shook. "Thought I had it." "You do now," she said. "Climb." He looked at her differently after that, not as an intel officer, not as a woman to be underestimated, but as someone who refused to let him fall. They pushed on, muscles burning, fingers numb, sweat freezing against skin despite exertion. Finally, they pulled themselves onto a narrow, wind-scoured ledge. Below them, darkness swallowing the world. Ahead, a faint glimmer of distant lanterns, Taliban compound, their target. Jackson crawled up last and surveyed the ridge. His voice was low. "We move on your call, Glenn." Sarah studied the map overlay on her wrist display, aligning intel with reality. 2 guards by the northern entrance. 1 patrol every 5 minutes. There's a blind spot near the eastern storage room. That's our entry. Reeves whispered, "Not too bad." Sarah's stomach tightened. "It's never the guards you see," she said. "It's the ones you don't." The SEALs checked weapons, switched safeties, set suppressors. Sarah's heart thudded like distant artillery. The smell of rock and dust filled her lungs. She could hear something else, faint, rhythmic, wrong. Gunfire. Not near them, but not far. Distress over the comms, faint, scrambled but undeniably American voices. "They're hitting us from the 'we're pinned' request." Static swallowed the rest. Sarah listened again, but radio silence answered. Reeves cursed under his breath. Commander Jackson's jaw tightened. Different unit, wrong place, wrong time. She scanned the valley, caught a glimmer of muzzle flashes bouncing off stone. "Quarter-mile out," she whispered. "That's our people." Jackson didn't look at her. He stared coldly toward the target compound. "Our orders are to secure intelligence. We don't engage unless." "Unless," she pushed. His silence was its own answer. Sarah stepped closer, voice low but urgent. "If you ignore them, they die. We save them now, they help protect us later. That's not emotion, that's strategy." Reeves surprised her by stepping forward too. "She's right, Commander." Jackson's stare flicked between them, battle plans and consequences colliding behind his eyes. "Finally, we split." He pointed. "Reeves, Martinez, Cooper, go. Support the pinned unit. Glenn, you and I continue the mission. Wilson, Ortiz, cover." Sarah inhaled sharply. She hadn't expected Jackson to choose her at his side. He trusted her intel that much. Or this risk needed someone willing to shoulder the blame if it went wrong. Reeves checked his weapon, met her gaze. "We're coming back," he promised. "Don't get yourself killed before I can thank you properly." She didn't reply, she couldn't. Her throat locked tight around all the things she didn't have time to feel. The team split into 2 silhouettes beneath moonlight, brothers in arms diverging into separate battles. Sarah led Jackson toward the compound, moving low, silent, eyes catching every flicker of shadow. Each step felt like the beginning of something, not victory, not yet, but truth rising from the dark. They reached the outer wall. 2 guards stood lazily beneath a flickering lantern. Sarah held up 2 fingers. Jackson nodded. 2 quick pops from suppressors, 2 bodies collapsing into dust. But Sarah didn't feel triumph. She felt the ticking clock of every life depending on them. They entered a narrow alley, stacked crates forming a maze. Sarah counted steps, matched symbols on the walls to intel visuals. Hidden door reinforced, password entry. She took a breath, knocked twice, paused, then once more. A slit opened, a single eye peered out, suspicion turning to surprise. Sarah acted first, grabbing the door and slamming her shoulder into it. Jackson rushed through, silenced shot, body falling. Inside, stairs leading down. She led the way. Every second down, that stairwell felt like sinking deeper into a mouth, ready to swallow them. The basement was cramped, maps, computers, radios, secrets etched into every surface. Sarah found the steel cabinet she had memorized from satellite scans, began photographing documents with practiced speed. 3 planned attacks, dates, targets, names. Evidence that could save hundreds, maybe thousands. Her hands moved faster, downloading drives, labeling encrypted files, feeding everything into her pack. Jackson guarded the door, breathing shallow, eyes unblinking. But Sarah felt a tremor in her gut, a warning. It came too late. The explosion hit like thunder. The world lurched, dust and heat roared into the room. Sarah slammed against the wall, stars bursting behind her eyes. Alarms wailed, shouts echoed overhead. Jackson coughed, staggering up. "Extraction point may be blown," he said, voice ragged. "Then we find another," she replied, pushing herself to her feet. Her legs wanted to collapse, her lungs burned, but she forced her mind to focus. Because fear had just become a luxury none of them could afford. Above them, footsteps thundered, more than 2, more than 10. Jackson looked to her. "Options." Sarah steadied her breathing. All the variables, all the maps, all the escape routes. One route remained. Risky, narrow, but real. "We go through them," she said, pointing upward. "Through the enemy?" he asked. "No," she replied, jaw tightening, "through hell." And somewhere in the night, men were bleeding and waiting to be saved. Why did the night suddenly feel as if it had a heartbeat of its own? They climbed, not like soldiers on a set mission, but like people dragging fate by its collar. The stairs spat them out into a courtyard gone wrong, splintered wood, overturned crates, a lamp guttering like a dying eye. The air tasted of cordite and dust. Outside, voices barked in Pashto, boots skidded on gravel. The explosion had turned a planned extraction into a living trap. For a breath, Sarah let the noise wash over her. The scramble of bodies, the metallic clink of weaponry, the raw curse of men trying to make sense of thermite and chaos. She felt every second like a needle, precise, painful, impossible to ignore. Jackson's voice cut through. "Form up, bounding movement. Ortiz, Wilson, check the east flank. Glenn." "Yes," she said, finishing the sentence he hadn't spoken. She already had an exit mapped in her head. The Shepherd's Pass route she'd marked 4 nights earlier while poring over satellite overlays and local guides. Narrow, stupid for most people, but for those who knew how to move it was a lifeline. They moved through the compound like ghosts, using shadow and rubble for cover. Martinez's voice crackled weakly over the comms. He was alive, but barely. Reeves's team was cutting their way through insurgent pressure, the radio static painting a portrait of men who had seen too much. Sarah's fingers trembled when she touched the flash drive in her pocket, not from fear but from the weight of what it contained. Names, dates, plans, proof. She'd done the work at great cost. That truth kept her moving faster than pain or exhaustion could slow her. A patrol rounded the corner, surprised by the sudden movement. Jackson ducked before she could blink and fired. 2 fallen, silent before they hit the dust. No celebration, only the pressure of living people still hanging by a thread. They pushed toward the wall that stood between them and the northern ravine. A ladder lay toppled, bolts bent, an old artillery scar in the plastering telling its own story. Sarah's breath felt like an animal in her chest. She counted the steps underfoot, each one a promise to someone she had never met who might live because she refused to let the plan die tonight. "Glenn," Ortiz hissed, "movement on the ridge." Sarah angled her head, listening. Beyond the lopsided roofs, shapes moved, too many to be local guards. They were converging. Someone had betrayed them, or the noise had done what noise always does, attract the wrong kind of attention. Adrenaline spiked into hot clarity. The mission had just grown teeth. "We split faster," Jackson said. "Glenn, get the intel to the Shepherd Path. Wilson and Ortiz cover the rear. I'll draw them off." "No," Sarah said, the word cutting the air. She didn't argue out of pride. She argued because she knew the terrain and the timing like a second clock. If Jackson drew them off, there would be no way back. If she ran now, she could thread through the ravine and meet the others at the extraction point she'd suggested in the village 2 miles north. But it was a gamble, one that asked for trust from men who had learned not to gamble with their lives. Jackson's jaw tightened. "This is my call." "You listen," she said softly, and the room stilled enough that even the rats seemed to hold their breath. "You draw them. I take the intel and lead the exit through the pass. It's narrow, I can move. It's my plan. We all get out." Reeves's glance held something like fear and a loosened faith. He had watched her pull Martinez from a bleeding field earlier and had seen the stubbornness that wasn't arrogance, it was responsibility. He nodded once, short and final. Jackson gave a curt, reluctant assent. "Do it, be fast." They moved, a sprocket of motion and blood, toward the hole she had scouted earlier. Sarah set the pace, every movement precise. The ruined alleyway funneled them into the open where the mountain kissed the compound's edge. A short scramble and then the near-vertical face that had seemed impossible to climb just hours earlier now felt like the only honest path. Her hands found holds like memory. This was part calculation, part muscle memory, part devotion built from fear. The stone bit into her palms. 2 steps, a quick shift, she hauled herself up while Jackson covered below. The seals followed, careful to the point of reverence. Halfway up, a whistle sliced the air. A distant, serrated sound that meant reinforcements. The enemy had eyes on them, and every moment now was a ledger entry recording who fell and who fled. A bullet grazed a module at Sarah's knee, a hot slap that made her teeth chatter. She kept moving. She could not afford to slow for pain or to grieve every bruise the world wanted to leave on her. They were almost at the ridge when the fire from below sharpened into aiming. Tracer rounds stitched the sky like malicious stars. "Go," Jackson bellowed, and they pushed over the lip, rolling into meager cover, a shelf of rock that offered the illusion of safety. From there, the ravine yawned open beneath them, a knife-cut path lined with stunted scrub and jagged stone. Shepherd's Pass curled down like a spine. It was as narrow as she'd said, barely wide enough for one person at certain stretches, a place where the wrong step meant not just failure but falling into a valley that would swallow you whole. Jackson counted heads. They started down single file. Each movement was shadow play in a spotlighted line. Each breath was rationed and loud. The path forced them into an intimacy with danger. They moved slow, too slow. Every second stretched like taffy until the world became a test of wills and sore muscles. Somewhere behind them, a shout signaled the enemy closing. The echo crawled after them. At a choke point, Ortiz slid. A shout. A rifle clattered down. Sarah's hand shot out and grabbed his sleeve, hauling him back before he smashed into a jagged tooth of rock. He stared at her like a man who'd seen a ghost. "You okay?" she asked, voice thin. He nodded, gripping his side. Blood had started to darken his shirt. It didn't matter if she was okay. They had no room for the luxury anymore. They heard the helicopter before they saw it, a throb far away at first, then swelling into a mechanical wail that made their teeth buzz. A beacon of salvation, sure, but also the sound of orders to be enforced and decisions to be made. Extraction was near, but not guaranteed. The ridge above offered vantage points to snipers. They had to be precise. They had to be silent. Then the valley changed its mind. A volley of gunfire erupted along the pass farther ahead, the gunshots shredding the night's fragile seams. Rebels had set up a blocking position where she had not expected it. Someone had anticipated the shepherd's pass, or luck had favored them with cruel indifference. "Ambush!" Reeves screamed. "Get down!" Bullets tore into the path above them. Men hit the rock and slid, rolling into fissures and shadows. Ortiz took a round in the shoulder, hissed, then kept moving as if the pain were merely a nuisance. That was the kind of courage that came from not having any better option. Sarah felt the world narrow to a pinprick. She had to move. Her mind cataloged and discarded: cover, angle, suppressing fire, diversion. Her hand found the drive in her pocket. She thought of the faces tied to the names hashed onto that tiny stick. Places that would be spared if she made it. Families that would not be ripped in two tonight. For them she pushed like a machine that still remembered how to be human. "Reeves," she shouted. "Left, left, take the ledge." He moved when she ordered. A sharp bark of compliance, trained reflex blending into trust. She rolled, found a tiny alcove, and aimed upward. Her rifle was an extension of a muscle trained by necessity. She sighted and fired in short, controlled bursts. Each bullet sent a cry into the night and took the echo away. The firefight was close, brutal, and senseless. Men fought through instinct and training, and sometimes, when everything else failed, because someone else depended on them. Sarah's breaths came shallow and fast, but they came. They fought their way through the choke. They took casualties. They left behind gear and pride, but they kept the one thing that mattered. The drive was still in her pocket. The names were still on the files. The truth held. At last, they cleared the narrowest curve, and the pass opened into a scrub plateau. Under a half-moon, the village lay ahead like a cluster of bones, humble roofs, and a thin wisp of smoke curling into the sky. The elders' houses huddled together in a familiarity that felt like air after drowning. They staggered to the village edge. An old man, the same who had met Sarah on a previous mission and led her to the cellar, stood waiting. His eyes were small slits, old as sorrow and sharp as limestone. He didn't ask questions. He simply beckoned. Inside the cellar, the world shifted into slow motion. Martinez's wounds were worse than they'd thought. Someone made tea and hands moved quickly and kind. Men who had hours before been strangers shared water and bandages, and the kind of silence that does not need to be broken. Sarah sat on the cold floor, the drive heavy in her pocket. She took off a glove, pressed her fingers to the scar running along the inside of her arm, the newer one that had earned her a place at a sealed table and a reputation she hadn't asked for. The ache pressed under her ribs, a memory that said sacrifice was not a one-off act but a lifelong conversation with your own conscience. Reeves settled beside her. He had changed during the climb, grin gone, hands steady, a softness around his eyes that hadn't been there in the cafeteria. He met her glance and said, quietly, "I thought you were playing at war when you walked in there earlier." She considered that, lips curving in half of a smile. "So did I," she admitted. He looked at her like a man who had been handed a new truth and had to decide whether to believe it. "You saved us." She shook her head. "We saved each other." Silence pooled between them. Outside, the village hummed with life that seemed ordinary despite the extraordinary that had cut through their night. Inside, men tended wounds and shared stories about small, meaningful things: a child's laugh, a lost sheep, little anchors in a world that had just tried to capsize them. Sarah thought of her father, of the ways he'd taught her to look beyond grand metaphors and focus on mechanics. He believed in systems, checklists, redundancies, the math of survival. She also thought of the informant who had given his life for a chance that his children might sleep one more night. She promised himself once, in some private, raw moment, that she wouldn't let the cost be in vain. Martinez's breath finally eased. The medics back at base would patch him, they said. Extraction was scheduled for dusk. They had bought time. It felt fragile and wholly impossible. The old man returned to Sarah with a cup of tea, his hands weathered like folded maps. He didn't ask her name. He didn't need to. His eyes said what language could not. "We see what you did. We know." Sarah took the tea like a benediction. It was bitter and warm and tasted like small miracles. She lifted her gaze and for the first time since the cafeteria allowed herself to be quiet. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something heavier, reflection. The morality of it all, the smallness of heroics, the cost of choices. Sometimes, she thought, dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Outside, a child laughed, a small, bright thing that felt like a promise. Inside, Sarah let that sound root into her like an anchor. They had the intel. They had each other bruised, broken, stubbornly alive. And for now, that had to be enough. How do you breathe when the air itself feels borrowed? Dusk crawled across the sky like a bruise spreading under skin. The cellar grew colder as the sun dropped behind the mountains, and with every passing ray of light, Sarah felt the countdown press harder into her chest. 6 hours until extraction. 6 hours until they were supposed to be airborne alive and headed back to safety. If the world cooperated. If fate didn't change its mind again. She sat with her back against the stone wall, rifle resting over her knees. Around her, the village doctor tended Martinez with steady hands. Reeves cleaned his weapon with mechanical focus, and Jackson stood near the hatch ladder, eyes narrow, listening for trouble carried on the wind. Sarah caught Jackson glancing at her occasionally, studying her, not as a liability anymore, but not quite as a known quantity either. She didn't blame him. She wasn't sure she knew herself tonight. Sleep teased the edges of her vision, but she fought it. The body could rest later. The mind didn't get that luxury. She pulled up the downloaded intel on her tablet screen, reading through each threat plan again and again. 3 American embassies, coordinated strikes, civilians who would never see the war coming. She pressed her thumb against the flash drive in her pocket, grounding herself in reality. Lives were saved tonight. Not merely hoped to be, not technically, not hypothetically. Saved. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt the hollowness of everything still left to lose. Reeves interrupted her unraveling thoughts. "You eat yet?" She blinked up. He held out a ration bar, torn open, half gone. She shook her head. "You need it more than I do." He huffed. "Knock it off, just take it." She stared at it, hesitating, then finally took a slow bite. Her jaw felt too tight, like she had to remind herself how to do something as simple as chew. Reeves settled beside her, not too close, just enough that if she were drowning she could reach out without screaming. He spoke quietly. "Martinez will make it, thanks to you." "I'm not the medic," she murmured. "You got him here, that's what counts." Sarah's fingers tightened around the ration bar. She didn't want thanks. She wanted certainty. She wanted guarantees. She wanted her father's voice telling her she had done enough. But war made a habit of leaving every good deed unfinished. Up above, a distant hum shivered the boards covering the cellar entrance. Reeves stiffened. "Rotor wash." Jackson raised a hand. Everyone froze. The sounds grew. Helicopters, more than one, not extraction, too early, wrong direction, wrong engine pitch. Sarah's gut turned to stone. "Taliban don't fly birds," Reeves whispered. "No," Jackson said, stepping toward the ladder. "Pakistanis do." That changed everything. Extraction airspace would be compromised. Foreign eyes would be scanning the mountains. The U.S. would hesitate before sending another helicopter through contested territory. They were suddenly invisible, not to the enemy, but to the very command that had promised to bring them home. Sarah's heart kicked against her ribs like a prisoner. She stood. "We need secure comms now." Jackson nodded, already trying. His fingers danced over his radio, shifting frequencies. Static, more static, then. "East window, extraction delayed." The rest dissolved into digital ash. Sarah stared at the ceiling, fists clenching. Reeves exhaled. So we're stuck. We're never stuck, she said too quickly. But the truth hovered there anyway. They were trapped. And the mountains were closing in. A scraping noise above made everyone's hands find their triggers. Wilson moved silently, ready to kill whatever came through that hatch. But the cellar door cracked open, and the old man's face appeared. He said one word in Pashto, grim and low. "Searchers." Footsteps echoed above the house, boots, too heavy for villagers, too disciplined for local militia. The search had begun. Jackson signaled, silent movements converting fear into precision. Lights out. No sound. Weapons steady. Sarah's lungs flattened into shallow, silent breaths. Boots creaked overhead, furniture scraped, voices shouted from outside. The house above was being torn apart board by board. If they found the hatch. Shots cracked through the night. Ortiz flinched. Wilson cursed under his breath. Sarah locked eyes with the old man, who forced the hatch shut again. His thin frame no match for soldiers, but his resolve unbreakable. He'd protected her informant once. Now he was protecting her. She wanted to scream at him to run, to save himself, but she couldn't make a sound. Because one whisper could turn survival into a storm of bullets. Minutes stretched into torture. Dust sprinkled from the ceiling. Someone above overturned a table, wood splitting loud enough to punch through nerves. Then a new sound. A child crying. Not from fear. From pain. Sarah's throat closed. A slap. The crying stopped. Another voice commanding, cold. The old man's eldest son had been home. Interrogation, punishment, punishment meant escalation. Sarah's fists dug into her palms until nails cut skin. Reeves leaned in, whisper barely audible. Not our mission, stay down. We survive, we help more later. Except later felt like a lie. What good was intelligence if innocent lives were broken to obtain it? What good was being human if you forgot to act like one? The footsteps moved toward the cellar entrance. Jackson's hand hovered above Sarah's shoulder blade, a warning, a plea. Don't get up. Don't be the reason we all die. But Sarah wasn't thinking with fear anymore. She was thinking with conscience. And conscience didn't negotiate. Her whisper fractured the silence. We go now. Jackson's eyes hardened, negative. Sarah leaned closer, not arguing, but trying to make him see what she saw. The line between survival and surrendering your soul. If they find this hatch, they'll kill the entire family. They helped us. We cannot repay that with silence. Ortiz whispered, pained, she's right. Wilson nodded once. Reeves checked his magazine. Small team, he mouthed, quick, silent. Jackson closed his eyes briefly, 1 second of leadership weighing every outcome. When he opened them, the decision was made. Not because Sarah outranked him. Not because she was right. But because some fights weren't about orders. 3 of us. His voice was barely breath. Reeves, Glenn, Wilson, low profile, swift, no missed shots. She nodded, jaw set like steel. 3 soldiers rose from the shadows like the dark had birthed them. Jackson grabbed her wrist, grip bruising. You break cover, I kill the lights, we disappear. No heroics, understood. She held his stare. I'm not trying to be a hero, sir. He released her. She was trying to be human. They positioned under the hatch. On Jackson's silent count, Wilson lifted it slowly, just enough to let Sarah's eyes peek above. Soldiers in camouflage, she recognized, Pakistani border patrol. Not enemy, but not friendly. And their allegiance tonight leaned toward whoever had paid them in blood or gold. 3 men visible, more outside. The elder son on his knees, beaten and bleeding. the old man held back by a rifle butt against his chest. Sarah's hand steadied her weapon. Jackson whispered into the comm, 3, 2, 1. The hatch burst open. Silenced shots cracked like thunder trapped in a jar. 1, 2, 3. Targets dropped in almost choreographed collapse. Sarah was out first, boots hitting dirt, sweeping left to right. Reeves was already firing at the doorway, forcing movement back. Wilson dragged the elder son into cover before he could be struck again. The old man stared at Sarah with a mixture of awe and fear, because sometimes the people who save you look exactly like the ones who kill you. "More incoming," Reeves yelled. Shadows sprinted across rooftops, militants or border guards responding to the dropped bodies. Too many, too fast. Sarah grabbed the old man's arm, urgency in every muscle. "Where do we shelter?" He pointed to a well hidden behind clay walls. "Not shelter, escape." "Go," Sarah barked. Wilson moved with the villagers. Reeves covered fire. Jackson hauled Martinez up the ladder with Ortiz right behind. The world dissolved into motion, shouting, muzzle flares, boots carving dust. Sarah's heartbeat drummed commands she didn't need to speak. "Protect, guide, move." Gunfire ripped through the air. A round nicked her vest strap, tugging hard enough she stumbled. Reeves grabbed her wrist, yanking her along. "We can't hold this," he shouted. "No," she agreed, "we move through it." They dove behind a cart as bullets chewed through crates and clay. Ortiz struggled but stayed upright, clutching his bleeding shoulder like a lifeline. Sarah popped up 2 controlled shots. A sniper toppled from a rooftop. Reeves grabbed additional mags off a fallen soldier. Then salvation. The beating thunder of helicopter rotors. Not enemy. Not base extraction. American. A rescue bird flying lower than protocol allowed, skimming the rooftops like a dare. Sarah's comm crackled. "Shadowhawk team, this is Pelican 1. We've got your location." Pop smoke. Jackson tossed a purple smoke canister and fired a flare into the sky. Time shrank to seconds. "Move, move." Reeves pushed Wilson ahead while dragging Martinez one-armed. Sarah stayed back, covering them, refusing to leave anyone behind. A rifle crack split the night and screamed past her cheek. Heat singed a line along her skin. Pain lanced her ear. Blood trickled warm and slick down her jaw. She didn't flinch. She fired back. Not clean, not perfect. Desperate. The Black Hawk banked low downdraft, turning smoke into a dancing veil. A rope ladder unfurled, slapping dirt. Jackson climbed first, helping pull Martinez up. Ortiz followed, gritting teeth against pain. Reeves looked at Sarah, eyes fierce. "Go." "You first," she shot back. For once, he didn't argue. He climbed. He yelled down, "Come on, Harvard." Sarah sprinted, bullets nipping at her heels. She grabbed the ladder, feet instantly leaving the ground. The bird lurched upward, dragging her into the sky as the mountain spat rage behind her. The village grew small. Then smaller. Then gone. Sarah dangled there a moment, breath burned out of her, vision doubling. Reeves clutched her harness strap until she could climb. Inside the helicopter, chaos met relief in a violent embrace. Jackson slammed the hatch shut. The crew chief shouted coordinates into the radio. The old man and his son were huddled under blankets, alive, terrified, saved because a choice had been made to care. Sarah slumped against the bulkhead, adrenaline fatting into tremors. Blood smeared her cheek. Her ears rang. Dust coated her throat like guilt refusing to pass. Reeves slid beside her, panting. "You good?" he asked. She wiped the blood with trembling fingers. "Ask me later." He nodded, understanding more in that single moment than he ever had before. She looked out the window one last time, toward jagged mountains that had tried to break her. And all she could think was, Survival isn't enough. Not if you lose who you are to earn it. They had lived, but some part of her knew. This night wasn't done with her. Not even close. How do you return to safety when your mind is still trapped in the war? The helicopter thudded down on the landing pad like a heart collapsing after a sprint. Rotors slowed, wind died, and suddenly the world was too still, as if silence itself was questioning how they survived. Sarah stepped off last. Her boots touched the concrete and her legs wobbled not from injury, but from the shock of being alive. The base smelled of diesel, dust, and the faint chemical tang of antiseptic familiar, yet somehow foreign after the raw dirt of the mountains. Medics rushed Martinez away on a stretcher. He gave her a weak thumbs up. It almost broke her. Jackson dismissed the team with a nod, too calm, too controlled. Leaders didn't get the luxury of unraveling where others could see. He met Sarah's gaze for a brief second, gratitude hidden behind command discipline, then followed the medics. Reeves lingered. He looked older than he had that morning, lines of fear and guilt etched along the edges of his bravado. "You need the doc too," he said, nodding at her ear, where blood had dried in a red trail down her jaw. "I've had worse," she told him. "Yeah, but worse doesn't mean nothing." He managed a half smile. "Don't make me carry you." She almost laughed, almost. "Get cleaned up," she said instead. "I'm fine." He hesitated, wanting to say more, then gave a small, defeated nod and walked away. And suddenly Sarah stood there alone, surrounded by people. That was always the trick of war. A nurse ushered her into the medical tent. Cold metal instruments, harsh overhead lighting. She sat on an exam stool, her body stiff, her mind somewhere still running through the mountains. The medic, a woman with a calm face and calloused fingers, cleaned her wound gently, despite the sting. "You're lucky," she said. "That round could have taken the whole ear." Sarah smirked faintly. "Would have saved me from listening to a lot of bad advice." The medic smiled back, but then her expression softened as she pressed a cold cloth to Sarah's cheek. "You should rest." Sarah didn't respond. Rest was a word she no longer understood. She left the tent and found her way to the small barracks room assigned to intelligence officers. The cot looked painfully inviting, but she paced instead, back and forth, like a caged animal with too much left to do. She removed her gear slowly, hands shaking more with each strap unbuckled. The weight lifted from her body but crashed heavier into her mind. When she reached for her tablet, she froze. The screen showed a paused video frame she hadn't meant to open, her father giving a speech years ago at an aerospace ceremony. She had saved it for moments of strength. But now watching him felt too much like asking questions she wasn't sure she wanted answers to. He had stared up at the stars his whole life. What would he think if he saw her now, staring into the darkness of war instead? Would he have understood, or tried to convince her she belonged somewhere above the earth instead of buried under it? She closed her eyes, the memory of the old man's beaten son, the slap, the crying child, the bullets slicing through night air, lives she had touched and nearly cost. Her stomach churned. There were victories that didn't feel like winning. Her door buzzed. She tensed instantly, instincts ready to fight. Reeves slipped inside before she could speak. He held 2 cups of instant coffee, one steaming, one decaf. He offered her the steaming one as if he wasn't sure she'd accept anything else. "I figured," he began, awkward. "Well, you look like someone who could use something warm." She took the cup, the heat soaking into cold palms. Coffee never tasted so necessary. He sat on the floor opposite her, back to the wall. "You did good today," he said quietly. She stared into the swirling dark inside her cup. "Good doesn't erase what almost happened." "That's the job." "No," she said softly but sharply. "The job is knowing when the line isn't worth crossing." He watched her, really watched her. The way someone looks at a story they want to understand but are afraid to open. "You saved a family," he said. "You saved Martinez, you saved us." "And who saved them?" she whispered. "Who saves the ones we leave behind?" Reeves exhaled through his nose, slow, thoughtful. "You carry too much," he said. "If I don't carry it," she shot back, "then who will?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. No answer was enough. Silence settled thick around them. Her hands shook around the coffee. She tried to hide it. Reeves saw anyway. He moved closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel the steadiness of his presence. "You're allowed to be shaken, Sarah," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Courage doesn't erase fear." Her breath hitched at the sound of her name spoken in that tone. She swallowed hard. What if one day courage isn't enough? "Then we go together," he said, "so neither of us hits the ground." Something inside her cracked, gently like a frozen lake thawing beneath spring sun. But she wasn't ready to let that warmth in just yet. She stood abruptly. "I need to report to command." "Now?" he asked, surprised. "Intel waits for no one," she said. She slipped out before he could argue. Her boots echoed down the dim hallway, as if the building itself questioned her pace. The command center doors parted. Screens flickered with maps and movement. Radios hissed updates from far-off danger. Commander Jackson stood with analysts and officers, already debriefing the operation. Sarah approached. He turned to her, unreadable. "How's your wound?" "Clean," she said. "Sir, may I speak freely?" "I expect you to." She inhaled. The Pakistani presence, the border patrol units, that wasn't coincidence. Someone tipped them off, someone at this base. Jackson nodded slowly, as if he had been waiting for her to catch up. "We're already investigating," he said. "Your intel is too valuable. Someone wanted to intercept the extraction or stop you from bringing it back." Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice. "It's not just the embassy attacks. Those documents mention something else, coded references I've seen before in larger networks. Someone inside is feeding information outward, and if they know, we have the intel." "They'll try again," Jackson finished. Sarah's pulse hammered in her neck. "We need to move the civilians who helped us," she said. "The old man and his son, they won't survive the night if insurgents track them here." Jackson's brow tightened. "Agreed. A relocation team is prepping, but this stays between us for now." Her gaze hardened. Understood. But understanding didn't soothe the dread pooling beneath her ribs. As she left the command tent, the night air wrapped cold around her. Stars shone brightly, indifferent and far. Reeves stood outside, leaning against a stack of crates, watching her with an unreadable expression. "You okay?" he asked again. No, she wasn't okay. But she nodded anyway. He didn't believe it, but he didn't push. "Command thinks someone's leaking intel," she told him. "So the real enemy might be inside these walls." He said it softly, bitterly. Sarah looked back at the lights of the base, too bright, too exposed. Her voice thinned into a whisper. "They won't stop, not until they bury the truth." Reeves clenched his jaw. "Then we don't let them." But a cold truth slid through her veins. Some battles weren't fought in the mountains. Some enemies didn't wear uniforms. Some wars didn't end when the bullets did. She felt the scar on her arm throb, a reminder that trust could carve deeper wounds than steel. She turned toward her barracks, steps slow, mind spinning. Behind her, the night shifted, wind brushing sand in a pattern that felt like a warning. Tomorrow the mission would change. Tomorrow the cost would rise again. Tonight she fought sleep with every breath, afraid of what waited behind closed eyes. Redemption wasn't a single act. It was a lifetime of choices, each one cutting deeper than the last. And she wasn't done bleeding yet. How do you fight an enemy who can walk right beside you and smile? Morning rose reluctantly over Fob Rhino, sunlight dragging shadows behind it like reluctant prisoners. Sarah stood outside, watching the horizon turn from ash to pale amber. She hadn't slept, not even a blink. Her heartbeat felt like marching boots, her bones like rusted armor, her thoughts like unrelenting echoes she couldn't outrun. Reeves approached quietly, as if afraid to break the fragile stillness she'd wrapped around herself. "You were up all night," he said softly. "So were you," she replied without looking at him. He shrugged, attempting levity. "Couldn't let you hog all the anxiety." She almost smiled, but the weight in her chest didn't let the expression fully form. Just then Commander Jackson waved them over from the operations tent. Sarah's posture straightened, exhaustion shoved deep behind focus. Duty called, and she would always answer. Inside, the atmosphere was different from last night. Tense, coiled. The room hummed with the kind of silence that wasn't calm but preparation. Jackson stood over a table scattered with photos, maps, coded transmission logs. A few high-ranking officers lingered at the edges, pretending not to stare at her. "Lieutenant Commander Glenn," Jackson began, "you believe someone on base compromised your operation?" "Yes, sir," she replied. "The timing was too perfect. The Border Patrol arrived precisely when we reached the village. That can only happen if our route was known." Another officer, Major Westbrook, intelligence chief, cleared his throat. "That's a serious accusation," he said, tone dripping skepticism. "Perhaps you're projecting stress onto circumstances." Sarah didn't flinch. "With respect, sir, I trust evidence more than assumptions." Jackson slid a tablet toward her. "Walk us through what you found." She tapped the screen, an intercepted message from 48 hours earlier. Encrypted, fragmented, but not enough to hide intent. "Coordinates match our planned infill route," she said. "Someone sent this before we even left." Westbrook scoffed. "Those could be Taliban comms." "No," Sarah cut in. "Taliban do not format transmissions using NATO structure." Reeves stepped closer to her, silent but unmistakably supportive. Jackson folded his arms. "So you believe the leak is internal?" Sarah met his gaze without wavering. "I know it." Westbrook tried to interrupt, but Jackson raised a hand, silencing him instantly. "What's your theory?" he asked her. "It's not about our mission," Sarah said. "It's about control of the information we brought back." She withdrew a printed document from her pocket, copies of intelligence logs she had spent half the night reviewing. In these files, there are references to American personnel. Their names were embedded in operations targeting our own embassies. Someone is removing the links that tie them to the attacks. Reeves stiffened beside her. "Are you saying?" "Yes," she said. "There's a mole." Westbrook slammed a palm onto the table. "You're accusing fellow officers of treason because of a hunch." Sarah's eyes narrowed sharply. "It's not a hunch," she said. "It's math." The room went silent, as if the walls themselves held breath. Jackson studied her carefully, weighing truth against risk. "We'll initiate an internal counterintelligence sweep," he said finally, quietly. Sarah nodded once, but her mind was still racing. Quietly, which meant slowly, which meant danger was growing faster than response. "We need to move the civilians now," she pressed. "If the mole realizes they survived, they'll become targets." Jackson's face hardened. "Transport team leaves in 30 minutes." Sarah felt tension release slightly, one victory, however small. Reeves stepped forward. "I'll go with them." Jackson considered, then nodded. "Take Ortiz and Wilson, keep it tight." Reeves turned to Sarah. "I'll make sure they're safe." His voice carried a promise heavier than any weapon. She wanted to say, "Be careful." She wanted to say, "Come back." Instead, she just nodded, afraid that anything spoken aloud might break. Then the general alarm sounded. All three jolted. The radio crackled. Security breach, west perimeter. Armed contact approaching base boundaries. Jackson snapped into command mode instantly. Positions now. Reeves placed a hand briefly, instinctively, on Sarah's shoulder. A grounding touch, a reassurance, a warning. Then he ran. Sarah sprinted to the nearest lookout station. Dust kicked up around her boots as soldiers dashed for firing positions. Sirens wailed across the compound. She climbed onto the guard tower, scanning the western horizon with binoculars. Movement, vehicles, too many. Her pulse spiked, memory flooding back of mountains, shadows, bullets hungry for flesh. But this time, the threat bared its fangs at the base itself. Jackson's voice barked through comms. All defensive units, prepare to engage. Gunfire crackled in the distance, faint at first, then unmistakable. Sarah focused through the lens, identifying weapon signatures, formation, advanced speed. Organized, tactical, not a random militia raid. This is coordinated, she said into comms. Deliberate assault. Someone knows we brought intel back. They're coming to finish the job. Jackson replied, hold positions, no one leaves the base. Her blood chilled. Reeves, Ortiz, Wilson. They were already on their way to the village. The transport convoy was outbound, heading directly into a battlefield. She switched her channel. Reeves, divert, turn back right now. Static hissed, then his strained voice. We see them, under heavy fire pulling. Gunshots exploded through the transmission. Sarah's chest constricted. Her fingers clenched the radio so hard it hurt. Reeves, she shouted, status. More static. Then faint. We're hit, Ortiz is down. Her heart slammed upward into her throat. She started down the tower ladder. Jackson's command roared through comms. Glenn, stand down, that's an order. She jumped the last rungs, boots slamming into dirt. I'm not letting them die, she said. Stand down. His voice came like a bullet, cold, fast, absolute. We need you here. You step out that gate, you're compromised. Someone grabbed her arm. A young corporal, terrified but determined to enforce the order. She jerked free so violently he stumbled. Don't touch me, she hissed. Fear glazed his eyes, not of her, but of what the situation meant. She sprinted toward the motor pool, every instinct screaming that she was already too late. Machine guns rattled along the perimeter. Mortar thumps shook the ground. Dust clouds rose like ghosts around vehicles and soldiers scrambling. She reached a Humvee, keys already in ignition, but soldiers formed a barrier blocking the exit road. Lieutenant Commander, one called. Base is locked down, no exceptions. Sarah's breath hitched. She wasn't just fighting an enemy now, she was fighting her own side. Let me through, she demanded. You heard the call, the soldier said. You get in that vehicle, we will have to stop you. Her fist trembled around her weapon. They stood between her and saving those who had bled beside her. The seconds stretched like wire ready to snap. One shot rang out from the hill. She spun, scanning. A bullet had struck the command antenna. Sparks caught fire along the dish. Comms flickered. The base wasn't the target. She was. The mole wasn't hiding now. The mole was hunting. The bullet wasn't meant to kill, it was meant to cut her off from Reeves, from command, from truth. Her heartbeat turned venomous. She looked up the hill, scanning rooftops, rocks, vantage points. A glint. She raised her rifle and fired one snapshot. The glint vanished. She didn't know if she'd hit anything. She didn't care. Jackson's voice crackled faintly through remaining speakers. All personnel, hold your ground. Reinforcements inbound. Reinforcements. Too far. Too late for her team. She looked again at the locked gate. Barriers, guards, fear, regulations. Sometimes rules were just well-lit cages. She stepped forward toward them. The guards raised weapons, warning aimed at her chest. "Ma'am, don't," one begged. "We're just doing our jobs." Sarah's voice trembled not with fear, but fury and desperation. "So am I." Her radio crackled again, Reeves' voice, barely breathing. "Sarah, please." That single word shattered the last restraint inside her. She stepped into the line of fire, hands raised, not in surrender but in defiance. "I'm going to save them," she said, "and if you have to shoot me to stop me, pull the trigger." The guards froze, guns shaking in their grip. Because killing an enemy was one thing. Killing someone who refused to abandon her own men was another. And in that heartbeat of hesitation, Sarah saw her chance. She moved. Not reckless, not blind. Certain. Because loyalty wasn't something she claimed. It was something she lived. Even if it killed her. She vaulted into the Humvee, engine roaring to life. Bullets struck the ground near her tires as she tore through the checkpoint barrier, splintering wood and metal like snapping bones. She didn't look back. She gripped the wheel, adrenaline clawing through her veins, eyes fixed on the dust rising from the road ahead. Reeves was out there. Bleeding. Waiting. Alive for now. She floored the accelerator. Fear couldn't slow her. Orders couldn't break her. Betrayal couldn't stop her. If the world wanted a war, it just made it personal. What happens when the line between duty and survival disappears? The Humvee devoured the dirt road, engine roaring like a caged animal finally loosed. Sand and gravel spit wildly behind the tires, the horizon a blur of heat and frantic fear. Sarah gripped the wheel so tightly her knuckles drained white. Her breath came sharp and uneven, adrenaline spiked with something far more dangerous. The terror of losing someone she wasn't ready to lose. Her radio hissed with static. She tried again, voice raw. "Reeves, Ortiz, Wilson, respond." A broken gasp crackled back. "Pinned, roadside ditch, West Ridge." "Reeves." "Alive." "Barely." "I'm coming," she choked out, more to herself than to the radio. The base alarm wailed behind her. Gunfire echoed faintly, a battle unfolding on two fronts. She didn't have time to worry about what she'd set in motion there. Not yet. She scanned the road ahead, searching for any sign of the convoy. Smoke smudged the sky just beyond a bend. A dark streak of fear crawled up her spine. She killed the headlights as she approached the ridge, the Humvee sliding to a stop behind a line of boulders. She grabbed her rifle and pack, boots crunching the gravel beneath her as she moved low, fast, silent. The smell hit her first. Burning rubber, diesel, blood. She swallowed hard and forced herself to keep moving. Bullet casings littered the ground. A destroyed transport vehicle smoldered, riddled with holes. Tire tracks led off-road, scraping wildly where a Humvee had skidded under heavy fire. Shadows. Bodies. Her stomach clenched. Then movement. A silhouette stumbled behind a rock slab, collapsing. "Reeves," she whispered fiercely. She sprinted. He lay slumped, one leg twisted unnaturally, blood pooling beneath his thigh. His rifle hung useless from his hand, magazine empty. His breathing was sharp and shallow. He looked up, eyes unfocused until he recognized her. "You disobeyed orders," he rasped. She dropped to her knees beside him. "Yeah, well, I figured you needed the help." He huffed a broken laugh that turned into a grimace of pain. "Ortiz didn't make it," he whispered. "Wilson trying to flank them." Sarah clenched her jaw, grief and fury braided into one unbreakable thread. "How many?" she asked. "Two groups, maybe 6 left." Reeves coughed, blood flecking his lips. "They know we've got the villagers." She scanned the ridge. Positions, cover, potential angles. Her brain shifted into the cold math that had kept her alive so many times before. She dug a field dressing from her pack and applied pressure to Reeves' thigh wound. "I need you conscious," she said, voice barely steady. "Can you stay with me?" Reeves grabbed her wrist weakly. "Just don't leave me again." Something cracked open inside her chest, something vulnerable and furious and terrified. "You saved me on that cliff," she whispered. "I'm not letting go." She pressed her forehead against his. 1 second of human connection in a world that kept trying to erase it. Then she lifted her rifle, her eyes sharpened. 2 gunmen crept toward them from opposite sides of the ridge, coordinated advance, tactical spacing. Professionals. She fired once headshot, second shot through the throat, both fell. But quiet didn't follow. Instead, a click in the distance, the unmistakable sound of a sniper adjusting scope. She tackled Reeves to the dirt just as a bullet exploded into the boulder behind them, rock shrapnel spraying their backs. "Sniper," Reeves growled. "I noticed," she snapped back, but fear made her voice quiver. She peeked, catching a glimmer of reflection up the ridge, the same signature she'd seen earlier when the base antenna was hit. Not random, same shooter. The mole's bullet. Her pulse hammered. The enemy wasn't just trying to kill them. They were trying to silence truth. She handed Reeves a fresh mag. "Can you cover left?" He nodded, grimace twisting his face as he chambered the round. "I've got enough bullets left to make someone sorry." Sarah scrambled up the incline, keeping low. The sniper took another shot wide, rushed. They were getting desperate too. She spotted Wilson's body just ahead, limp, rifle cast aside. Her chest tightened. She crawled to him, 2 fingers pressed to his neck. A pulse faint but there. Not gone, not yet. She dragged his body behind a rock, as much cover as she could offer in seconds. Reeves laid down, suppressing fire toward the second group closing in from below. Their return shots kicked dust around his boots. He cried out, grazed along the ribs, but held the line. Sarah positioned herself, exhaling slowly. She aimed not where the glint was, but where the glint would be when they shifted position again. She waited. The moment stretched. Then, glint. She fired. A half-second pause. Then a body slumped out from behind a rock, thudding heavily down the slope. Her satisfaction lasted barely a breath before chaos surged up again, more insurgents advancing. "Too many. Too close." Reeves shouted, "Incoming." The explosion hit like a giant's punch, dirt and stone tearing upward. Sarah was thrown sideways, ears ringing, vision smeared with dust and light. But her hands kept their grip on the rifle. She rolled into a crouch. A figure rushed her, blade glinting. She fired point blank, he dropped. Another lunged, she deflected his arm, slammed her elbow into his jaw, he sprawled. It became a blur, motion over thought, violence as survival. Then, click. Her rifle ran dry. The fighter surged toward her with a snarl, knife raised. She grabbed his wrist, shoved, twisted hard, stabbing him with his own blade. He gasped, collapsed, dead weight in her hands. She dropped him, chest heaving. Blood, not hers, soaked her sleeves. Behind her, Reeves groaned, still alive, barely. She ran to him. "We need to move," she said. "Got a plan?" he panted. She nodded. "Always." She hauled him to his feet, his arms slung around her shoulders. He cried out but didn't stop. Wilson dragged behind them, barely conscious. The Humvee, riddled with bullets, still roared to life when she turned the key. She helped Reeves inside, secured Wilson in the back, then floored the accelerator just as more enemies crested the ridge. Gunfire hammered the vehicle, rear window shattering, metal screaming. Reeves leaned out, firing bursts to keep them back. "Base locked us out," he yelled. "They won't let you back through the gate." "Good thing I don't need the gate," she said, eyes locking on a service route ahead. a maintenance tunnel carved into the ridge, restricted, unknown to most personnel. But she had studied every map twice. She hit the tunnel hard, headlights cutting through darkness as the pursuit fell behind. Breath staggered out of both men as the Humvee rattled through the narrow cave. When they finally burst out the other side, sunlight hit them like salvation. But it didn't feel like it. Reeves leaned his head back, eyes closing tight. "Sarah, you saved me." She gripped the wheel, knuckles trembling. "No," she whispered, "we haven't saved anyone yet." Because ahead of them, on the horizon, smoke continued to rise from Fob Rhino. The attack wasn't a distraction. It was a takeover. The mole wasn't trying to escape. They were trying to win. Reeves swallowed painfully. Whoever did this, whoever leaked, they're going after the intel. "They're going after you," Sarah corrected, voice cold as stone. "Because you trusted me, because you saw the truth." Reeves turned his head, met her eyes, and in that gaze was the fear that neither of them dared speak. This war wasn't between nations anymore. It was between people wearing the same flag. Her radio beeped, an emergency frequency. Jackson's voice breathless. "Glenn, if you're alive, don't come back to base." Sarah slammed the brakes. The wheel skidded, dust billowing. Reeves stared. Did he just? The transmission cut, replaced by a voice she didn't recognize. "Lieutenant Commander Glenn, you are now considered rogue. Stand down and surrender immediately." Rogue. The word hit harder than any bullet. Because it wasn't just the enemy hunting her now. It was her own uniform. Her own country. Her father's legacy. Her voice barely made it out, cracked and small. "They're framing us." Reeves clenched his jaw. "Then we prove them wrong." But Sarah shook her head, tears burning hot behind her eyes. "We're not going to survive this," she whispered. Reeves reached, fingers brushing hers, grounding her again. "Maybe not," he said, "but we fight anyway." She swallowed, forcing air back into lungs that wanted to collapse. Because courage wasn't about survival. It was about refusing to surrender what made you human. She put the Humvee back into gear. The mountains ahead waited, wide, dangerous and merciless. But Sarah no longer feared the dark. Because the real darkness was behind them. And she would rather die running toward truth than live kneeling to a lie. She accelerated, dust swallowing their tracks. The world believed she was a criminal now. Fine. Let them. Because sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes justice rides into hell with 2 wounded soldiers and a flash drive full of truth. And refuses to die quietly. What do you hold on to when the entire world lets go of you? Night swept in faster than expected, as if darkness couldn't wait any longer. The Humvee rolled to a stop at a narrow cliff overlooking endless valleys, jagged earth stretching like broken promises into the horizon. Sarah cut the engine. Silence settled, heavy, expectant. Reeves winced as she helped him out, his wounded leg buckling. Wilson drifted in and out of consciousness in the back. They were alive, but barely. "We need cover," Sarah whispered. A rocky cave nestled into the cliffside, just deep enough to hide them. She laid Wilson against the wall, covering him with a jacket. Reeves lowered himself beside him, the pain in his body undeniable, but his grip on consciousness stubborn. Sarah crouched near the cave entrance, scanning the darkness. Helicopter lights blinked far off like eyes searching the ground. They weren't rescue birds. They were hunting her. Her radio crackled again, smug, composed. "Lieutenant Commander Glenn, you cannot run forever. Hand over the drive and the traitors with you. This ends tonight." Traitors. The word echoed in the hollow space. Ugly, wrong, poison disguised as justice. Sarah picked up the drive, a small device, containing truths powerful enough to topple careers or nations. truths that were now worth more than 3 human lives combined. Reeves' voice cracked through the silence. Sarah, they'll kill those villagers if we don't expose this. She turned, eyes burning. They'll kill you, she said. They'll kill us all. He managed a strained smirk. You think I joined the Navy to retire quietly? Her throat tightened, an ache that threatened to unmake her. She sat beside him, close enough to feel his shivering breaths. I can't lose you, she confessed, words finally slipping free unarmored. Reeves reached up, fingertips brushing her cheek, with a tenderness that hurt more than any wound. You don't have to save the whole world, Sarah, he whispered. Just save the part of it that's still good. She stared into his eyes and saw conviction that hadn't dimmed even in the face of betrayal. Saw the man who believed in her when everyone else saw just a rank. Saw the courage she wanted to deserve. She nodded slowly. Then she squeezed his hand once and stood. Her boots felt heavy, her heart heavier. But purpose made her unbreakable. She approached the cave edge, breathed in the sharp mountain air, and screamed into the darkness. Come and get it. For a moment, nothing. Then footsteps, flashlights sweeping through the rocks, the whir of rotor blades growing louder. Reeves tried to pull himself upright. Sarah. She raised a hand, gentle command. Stay, she said. I need you alive. She stepped out into the open, a single figure against the backdrop of night. A spotlight flared from above, drenching her in harsh white. A man's voice boomed through loudspeaker. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Glenn, you are under arrest for treason, unauthorized engagement, and aiding enemies of the United States. Drop your weapon. She dropped the rifle, letting it hit the dirt. But her spine stayed straight, chin high. You have something that belongs to us. She held up the drive. No, she said, voice cold as the mountain stone. This belongs to the truth. A pause. Then a familiar figure stepped forward through the soldiers. Major Westbrook. Smug smile, safe behind men willing to bleed for his lies. I gave you a chance to be silent, he said, but you just couldn't accept your place. Sarah stared, finally seeing him clearly. Not a superior. Not a soldier. A coward dressed in power. You sold out American personnel, she said. You sabotaged operations. You ordered civilian deaths, because to you, lives are expendable if they threaten your control. He laughed, a short, cruel sound. You're smart but naive, he said. Power isn't about doing what's right, it's about winning, and I always win. He stepped closer, hand extended. Give me the drive. Sarah's jaw clenched. No. His smile dropped. You think those men will defend you, he hissed. They will follow the voice that wears authority, and right now that voice is mine. The soldiers around him lifted weapons, barrels trained on her chest. Reeves tried to crawl out, but Wilson grabbed his sleeve weakly, shaking his head. Sarah looked into those rifles. And she didn't feel fear. She felt clarity. The drive in her hand seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat demanding justice. She raised it just a little. Westbrook's eyes narrowed. Don't even think about. She threw it. Not away. Up. High toward the helicopter hovering above, its spotlight locked on her. A single shot cracked, too slow, too late. The drive hit the rotor housing, shattered. Fragments scattered into the night like bright confetti of consequences. Data flooded into the chopper system. Force transfer initiated through impact-activated burst protocol. A failsafe. Something she installed hours earlier. Westbrook's face turned from anger to panic in a heartbeat. What did you do? He snarled. Sarah smiled, small, tired, triumphant. I made sure you can't bury the truth anymore. The helicopter's comms burst alive, screens inside flashing with decrypted intel. The pilots yelled at each other, confusion and realization spreading like wildfire. Voices over radio, multiple channels, confirming American involvement. Internal sabotage. Who authorized these attacks? Westbrook spun, shouting orders no one listened to, control slipping through his fingers like sand. He turned back to Sarah, fury wild in his eyes. "You ruined everything." She nodded steady. "I know." He drew his pistol. Time slowed. Reeves screamed her name. Sarah stood unblinking, ready. But the shot never came. A sniper crack split the air. Westbrook jerked backward, a clean bullet hole through his chest. He collapsed, dead before he hit the dirt. Sarah froze, stunned. Then soldiers lowered their weapon, confusion clouding their faces. One stepped forward, helmet tilted toward her. "Ma'am, what's happening?" She exhaled, shaking, adrenaline draining fast. "The truth," she said, "it's happening." The helicopter began broadcasting intel to base command, to NATO, to every secure channel it could reach. Westbrook's entire web of corruption unraveling in real time. Sarah staggered back to the cave. Reeves reached for her, relief and awe warring in his expression. She knelt beside him. "You okay?" she whispered. He nodded, tears glassing his eyes. "You're insane," he breathed. She laughed, a cracked, exhausted sound. "Probably." Sirens in the distance. Friendly forces incoming. Medics rushing out of vans. Wilson was lifted onto a stretcher. Reeves, too, fighting to stay conscious just to keep her within sight. As they strapped him into the medical litter, his hand caught hers, grip weak but desperate. "Don't go," he murmured. She leaned down, pressing her lips gently against his forehead. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. He was whisked away, lights flashing, voices commanding, chaos healing into unity again. Sarah stood alone as dawn began pushing back the night. The base commander approached, face softened by respect, replacing earlier doubt. "We were wrong about you," he said quietly. "The world will know what you did." She didn't respond right away. Because praise meant little when lives had been lost. Her eyes drifted to the sunrise, and she spoke softly. "I didn't do it to be known." He frowned, not understanding. She smiled, weary and wise. "I did it so others wouldn't be erased." He left her then, giving space to a heart that had carried too much. Sarah placed a hand over her chest, feeling her pulse, strong despite everything. Wind brushed her hair, gentle, forgiving. In that quiet she understood. Strength wasn't loud. Courage wasn't fearless. Heroes weren't perfect. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. She stared at the light on the horizon, eyes steadier than ever. Because the world could call her many things. But she knew the truth. She wasn't a traitor. She wasn't a burden. She was a soldier. A protector. A woman who refused to let darkness rewrite what was right. And that was more powerful than rank. More permanent than fear. More honorable than any medal. Sarah Glenn, the woman they underestimated, had saved the truth. And the truth always stands longer than the lies that try to bury it.